Hey there, photographers. I'm up here in beautiful Newfoundland, this gorgeous coast up here. I just absolutely love it. It's a beautiful morning. And I'm here to see if you'll join me on a little bit of an experiment. I'm going to show you a bunch of photos, and I want you to really take your time with them and think about them however you normally would when you look at photos online. So kind of break them down, critique them in your mind, see what you feel when you see them, and see what thoughts come to mind. Try and remember those, because I'm going to ask you some questions after I show you these photos. So that's the first step. Let's go ahead and do that. Here's the photos.
All right, here we go. I got the photos set aside here, and let's start taking a look through them. And what I want you to think about is, in general, do you feel anything? Positive, negative? What do you think about them artistically? What do you think about them technically? Do they set a mood for you? Do you feel any emotion when you see these photos as you go through? So just think about these photos as if you were looking through social media, scrolling through, and seeing different photos, and see what you think. And then I'll ask you some questions at the end and show you some stuff. And I'm doing these somewhat quick because I think that's how most of us tend to encounter and consume photos. And so I'm not going to give you a ton of time with each photo. And I'll show you all of them again at the end. There we go, back to the beginning. And there's all the photos. And so what do you think? Anything stand out to you? Anything jump out at you about any of the photos? Take some time to think about that.
All right, so now that you saw those photos, I want you to kind of go through what you thought about when you saw them, both technically and artistically. And on the technical side, did you ever think in your mind, I wonder what camera took these photos? I'm guessing most of you didn't. Some of you probably did, but I think most of you probably didn't think, oh, I wonder what camera this was. And if you think about when you're going through photos on social media and looking online, when you see a photo that really impacts you, that really gets your attention, is that the first thing you think? Or the second thing? Or even the fifth thing? Or at all? Because for me, it never is. I never think, oh, I wonder what camera took that photo. And yet, if we look at reviews for camera gear online and ways to improve your photography, one of the things that's talked about the most, and one of the things I see so many photographers doing is, I gotta get this new camera, I gotta upgrade to this camera, I gotta switch from this brand camera to this brand camera because it's gonna be better. And in the end, when we look at these photos, do we think about that at all? I don't think so. For myself, I can say I never do. I never look at a photo and think, I wonder what camera took that. And so why this obsession with what camera we're using? So what are some of the things I tend to think about when I view a photo that I really love? The first thing is, wow, look at the mood of this, or the emotional impact. Like, it just catches my attention, right? Or look at this setting, look at this location. All of those things are things I think about when I see a photo that wows me and captures my attention. Look at the behavior, look at the lighting, look at that composition. All the things that have nothing to do with what camera actually took that photo. There seems to be this hyper focus in the wildlife photography industry as a whole on the cameras and the resolution and no noise at all and the just absolute best quality and all these technical details that we can sort of point to factually about this camera versus this camera, and we can compare this camera to this camera. But in the end, when we view these photos that really capture our attention and wow us, none of that matters. None of that is an important part there. Now listen, I'm not trying to say it doesn't matter at all, because yeah, if you took a photo with an entry-level camera in incredibly low light with a lens that wasn't sharp, well, that camera's probably not going to produce the results that the latest high-end camera is going to produce. And so that photo may suffer because of it. But all things considered equal, photos for a very long time now have been capturing amazing photos. Some that I would say you can't tell the difference between.
All right, so now you know what I was looking for when I asked you to check out these images and see what you thought, see what you feel. I was looking to understand if you thought about what camera took them, or if you could even tell if you did think of that. And now knowing that, let's take a look at them again. Can you tell which of these photos was taken with which camera? Or can you even tell which was taken with an older camera versus a newer camera? I'm guessing you probably can't. I know you're viewing this video on YouTube, so it may not be the absolute best, sharpest quality, but that's somewhat representative of how many of us consume photos, especially when we talk about viewing them on social media, specifically Instagram, and viewing them on our phones. No matter where we're viewing them from, we're probably, many of us, viewing them on our phones, so tinier screens without that much resolution. So no matter where you're watching this video, whether you're watching it on a large screen or on a phone, can you tell the difference of these photos, which was taken with which camera? I'm not going to go through them all again, but I just want you to think about that. Looking at these photos, can you tell? And probably not. So let's actually take a look and see what we got here. So we have 5 different cameras. Let's start with the newest camera, the Nikon Z9. There's the 3 photos from that. Let's go jump now to the oldest camera. There's the 3 photos from that. Let's put them together and view them larger. Can you tell the difference? Now, maybe if you followed me as a photographer for some time, you can maybe tell the difference between style and creativity with some of these photos, but quality-wise, resolution-wise, I'm guessing you can't tell. I'm just telling you right now, I can't tell looking at them on the screen this size. I'd have to actually look at the pixel dimensions to be able to tell which one was which. Other than the fact of knowing I know which ones I took, but just flat out quality-wise, I would be perfectly happy using any of these photos here for any purpose I have right now. Contest entry, getting it printed, getting it published, any of those things, I'd be fine with any of these photos. All right, so here we go. Let's look at the next oldest camera, the D3S. There's the 3 photos from that. We have the Nikon D4S next up in line, and then we have my first mirrorless camera, the Nikon Z6 II. So that's it. That's all of those cameras. Also, let's take a look at the ISO ranges here. We have a decent range of ISOs, and the highest ISO image, this one right here, came from the Nikon D3S. Now, that is an older camera, but I will say it was a high-end camera for its time. It was Nikon's best of the best, and it was made specifically to be really good in low light, which is why I bought that camera. That's why I've purchased all of these cameras beyond the D300. I went D3S, D4S, Nikon Z6 II. The Nikon Z9 was a purchase simply to get the latest and greatest technology in the camera for what Nikon was putting out in a mirrorless camera at the time. But honestly, I really don't want the resolution personally, nor do I think it's the best low light camera I've ever shot. I think the Nikon Z6 II holds the crown for that for me as far as the best low light camera quality images I've ever seen from any of the cameras I've shot. Okay, so those are the ISOs we have ranging there, and then we have some really low resolution images, most would consider, in that 6 to 8 megapixel range. These 2 images there coming out of, let's see which camera they came out of, the D300, understandably, right? And then lastly, we have a wide variety of range of lenses here, ranging from the 70 to 200, 2.8 to, this was probably the technically worst lens I shot as far as sharpness and speed and that sort of thing, but still produced some fine results that I'm able to mix in with results from the most high-end lens I've ever bought that's currently available right now. The latest and greatest from Nikon compared to a really old lens. I actually should look up when that lens came out. This is the old Nikon 300mm f4, not the PF version. This is the AFD version that existed before that lens came out. And it was a pretty old design. It had a manual aperture ring on it. It was heavy. It was slow. But I can take some great photos with it that I'm guessing many of you probably couldn't differentiate between something that was taken on a $10,000 plus lens when viewed in the context of all of these photos, and not specifically thinking about what camera or what lens took these photos.
So the images you saw were a mix of 5 different cameras that I've owned that span a 16-year period. 16 years of cameras, people, ranging all the way back from the D300 that was released in 2007, a 12 megapixel crop sensor camera, all the way to the Nikon Z9, which is the camera I'm currently using, which is a 45 megapixel camera that was released in 2021. In between there, you had the D3S, the D4S, and the Nikon Z6 II. So a very incredible wide range of cameras. And I'm guessing when you looked at all those photos, you didn't think, oh, look, this camera was the worst, or this camera was the worst, or this camera took this photo. Oh, this photo's horrible because of this camera. They all look great. I took some amazing photos. Not as amazing as now, right? Because I have 16 years of experience, but I took some great photos on that Nikon D300 crop sensor camera that honestly I would never push past 800 ISO, probably. That first Nikon D300 I used was 12 megapixel. The D3S after that, 12 megapixel. The D4S after that, 16 megapixel. And then more recently, the Nikon Z6 II, 24 megapixel. And now this behemoth 45 megapixel images from the Nikon Z9. So when you view these photos in a video like this, or you view them online, it doesn't matter where they're presented online, you're probably looking at them on your phone. Even if you're looking at them on the computer, the D300 had enough resolution to do that. The lowest resolution image I showed you in that entire batch was 7 megapixels after I cropped it. 7 megapixels. And it looks fine. In fact, I would say you probably can't pick out which one it was because there's not that much of a difference. It's that crazy to me that we have this craze over more and more resolution, and yet most of us probably can't pick out a 7 megapixel cropped image versus a 45 megapixel image. And one that was from a camera 15, 16 years ago. How crazy is that? So why this craze over what camera is better, especially when you're considering all the modern cameras from all these different companies at the same time? It's all amazing technology, you know? So like most people would probably say a camera from 15 years ago can't compete, right? But when you look through these photos, you couldn't really tell much of a difference, could you? I can anyway. I did certainly pick out photos that showed the best possible scenario from that camera. But I also really didn't know what I was doing back when I started 16 years ago with that first camera. If I were to put that camera in my hands now, I could produce some amazing images. Why aren't I shooting a camera like that right now? Well, the Nikon Z9 is a way better camera. Yes, there are certainly things on these cameras that are worth the upgrade. The focusing system and the low light capability on them is far and above better than what that 15, 16-year-old D300 was doing for me. And what does that mean? How does that translate in my photography? Well, it makes my job easier. It allows me to capture both moments that I either previously couldn't have or would have struggled to. So it makes it easier to capture moments, specifically action, but especially with the eye tracking focus on these new cameras now, it allows me to freely compose. And I just recently broke my Nikon Z9, which is why I'm shooting a Nikon Z6 II now. And so I went from my eye tracking camera that I've been using for almost 2 years now, or over 2 years, back to a camera that doesn't have any eye tracking and admittedly much slower, more rudimentary focus. Yeah, it kind of sucks. Like, it's not as easy to shoot. It's not as easy to compose. It's not as easy to track some of these subjects, but I'm still out here getting shots. I'm still getting some great shots most of the time, I think. Damn, this sun is killing me. So, of course, these modern cameras certainly track things better, have better low light performance, and make things a lot easier to capture when in the field than cameras that are older and even certain different cameras, right? So there is that little bit of a difference there, and that's why I use them. It really is. It makes my job easier, but it is not to say that I cannot or could not take some great photos with older cameras that didn't have all that technology in them. But I would say for many of the images that I share online, the difference between them at that point is imperceptible. And that's a big point right there, I think. And so I think this craze of chasing more resolution and removing all noise from every image using different software after the fact, that more often than not, from what I see, actually reduces the quality of the photo, makes it look cartoon-like and stuff like that. I know that's an opinion-based thing, but this craze of getting rid of all noise and having these crazy high-resolution sensors, I think it's just overblown. I don't know why we're so focused on that, because in the end, when we think about all these images that I just showed you in the beginning, and if you are honest with yourself, and when you think about all the photos that you see online, what is it that you think about when you see those photos that catch your attention and grab your attention and wow you? It is not the camera that took it. So many of us focus on this technical perfection, the most detailed, the sharpest image, the cleanest low noise possible image. And in the end, I think many of us should be focusing more on aesthetics, composition, the mood that is set, and the overall aesthetic of a final image. Those are the things that I think matter a little bit more in the end, not the camera that we captured it with. And so if you're thinking about trying to change cameras because, oh, I can't get this with this camera and this camera might have this one feature that's better, I think your time might be better spent, and your money honestly, on just getting out in the field, perfecting your craft, learning lighting better, learning to use lighting better, learning about the subjects and the animals that we're trying to capture, because learning all of those things is going to make that more impactful photo in the end, not that camera that does that one feature a little bit better, regardless of whether it does or not. Thanks for listening to my thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think about this. In any case, happy shooting out there. Have fun. I'm off to go see what else I can find.